It's time to come in from your dessert to have Havdalah. It's time to come in from the Ulam and join your family for Havdalah.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Rabbi Javier Canapan, and the power of improvisation on the part of our musicians is just beyond. It's just so wonderful. On behalf of our congregation Beth Torah, and on the Rabbinical Assembly of Greater Kansas City, of which I have the privilege to be immediate past president.
Ooh.
I paid my dues more than needed. A big thank you to our BOW committee for bringing us beyond our walls, and to our digital docents who are managing our streaming. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you will see information and links in the comments. If you are joining us on the virtual sanctuary, you can see links right above the player. You're going to have to click a lot of things and you'll get there eventually if you are not there yet. Actually, if you don't understand, if you couldn't hear what I just said, that means that you haven't gotten there yet, right? But if you are on, one more important information for you to have is that if something happens, we have a technical assistance line, our TAL, and it's 913-303-1134. You can text that number and one of our docents will call you back and we'll get you online again. We continue our time together as we welcome the high holiday season. We say goodbye to Shabbat and hello to the last week of the year, 5782, by separating Shabbat from the rest of the week. Join us for Havdalah. I think it's going to be on our screen.
Yep.
Oh, I need to move this?
Thanks.
Sorry.
Rabbis, am I right? Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Eliyahu Hanavi.
If you're just joining us this evening, we will have our program first, and then in about an hour or so, we will pause for about 10 minutes, and then we will begin our Selichot service. It's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Alan Morenes, the founder of the Musar Institute, to our congregation and to Kansas City. Dr. Morenes is a leading figure in the contemporary revival of the Musar movement, which is really an 1,100-year-old authentic Jewish personal and communal spiritual tradition that was nearly lost after the Holocaust. A filmmaker, Rhodes scholar, and anthropologist whose focus has been Hindu religious pilgrimages, Dr. Morenes reached a personal turning point in his life in 1997 that led to his exploration of Musar. Dr. Morenes sought out Rabbi Yehiel Yitzchok Per, an accomplished master who stood in an unbroken tradition of the Musar tradition. Following a few years of study, he reinterpreted the ancient Musar rulings and practices for modern audiences in his book, Climbing Jacob's Ladder and Everyday Holiness. To address the growing public interest in Musar, he founded the Musar Institute in 2004, and he went on to author 2 more books, Everyday Holiday and With Heart in Mind. Alan continues to explore and interpret original Musar sources in Hebrew and is making these valuable teachings available to the contemporary world. It's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Morenes to our congregation. Special thanks to our sister congregation, Bnei Yehuda, for sharing their scholar in residence with all of us on this wonderful evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov to you too.
He's so modern, I'm so old-fashioned. But he's younger than me, so it's okay. I can feel okay about that. So, very great pleasure to be here. Thank you all to everyone in the community who played a role in causing me to be here, to come back, and because it is back. I think this is my 3rd time in Kansas City, so I'm very happy to be back, and especially thanks to my dear friend Irv Robinson for his role in causing me to be here. And as it says, not there, but the previous slide said, that what makes this evening so special is that we've come to that particular point in the calendar when Ashkenazi Jews begin to recite the Selichot prayers, which start in the week before Rosh Hashanah, although our Sephardi brothers and sisters have got the jump on us because they start at the beginning of Elul. And this is a time when we are really brought to a process of self-examination. That's really what this time of year is about. It's time to stop drifting, stop rationalizing, stop carrying on, and just literally stop and then take a look, take stock, and decide what needs to be cleaned up, and going forward, what can we do better? And even though, as we come to Rosh Hashanah, our ancestors have passed down to us hundreds of pages of liturgy, the Machzor is like that, and that's not what the essence of Rosh Hashanah is. The rabbis in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, the section of the Talmud dealing with Rosh Hashanah, they present a scenario where you have a choice of going to two synagogues. In one of the synagogues, the person is an expert in liturgy. They can daven like the best of them. The other one, not so good at the prayer service, but an expert shofar blower. And the rabbis say, which one should you go to? And they answer, the shofar blower. Because the essence of Rosh Hashanah is waking up. And the shofar blowing is meant, that blast of the shofar, it doesn't have words, it doesn't have melody really, it's just a blast. And we're supposed to be prepared to take that in as an awakening, a blast to wake us up. And in fact, one of the names for Rosh Hashanah is Yom Teruah, which, you could, if you want to translate, this day is a blast. But that's not the exact translation. But it's a day of blowing because that's the central thing. Why is it the central thing? Because waking up is the central thing, the central aspect. And it's remarkable that we are capable, and I include myself in the category, of going day after day asleep. And then comes Rosh Hashanah. Before Rosh Hashanah comes Elul. And then comes Selichot. And it's all a process of waking us up. Listen to the words of Rambam, Maimonides, on this subject. He says, even though the blowing of the shofar in Rosh Hashanah is a biblical decree, and it is, so you're commanded from the Bible to do this, it hints as if to say, wake up, you sleepers from your sleep, and awake, you slumberers from your slumber. Search your deeds, repent, and remember your Creator. Those who forget the truth on account of the vanities of time, and who waste their entire year with vanity and emptiness, which neither help nor save, look to your souls, and mend your ways and your deeds, and let every one of you forsake your evil way and your improper thoughts. So that's what this season is about. It's about waking up and doing an accounting of yourself, taking responsibility for yourself, cleaning up what needs to be cleaned up, and then making resolutions about how it's going to be going forward. Embedded in this process of introspection and repair, and especially resolution for the year going forward, is a remarkable principle of Judaism that I really want to underline, because it's not true of every religious or spiritual tradition. Judaism affirms that we can change. Just because it's been that way in the past year, past 5 years, past 10 years, just because you've behaved in a certain way, year after year, or maybe just in the last year, Judaism affirms until the final day of your life, you can change. And that's a remarkable principle and a very central one, and makes sense of this season, because if you couldn't change, and there are religious traditions and spiritual traditions would say you are born into a certain category and it's immutable. Nothing you can do can cause you to change your fate. You're born with a fate, and that's it, and your job is to surrender and submit to your God-given fate. That's your life journey. Judaism does not hold like that at all. Judaism asserts that we can change. And the reason I'm here with you this evening, as the rabbi said in introducing me, is because my engagement in the Jewish world has been with the Musar tradition. And while Rosh Hashanah emphasizes this process of change and really ascent, it's not just about changing like one bad way to another bad way. The hope is you're going to get better. Although one of the Musar teachers said, don't get better, get higher. And there is a sense of ascent in that. The idea of change is actually very central to the Musar tradition all year round. It takes this idea and it becomes a very central principle for how we live day in and day out. And the Musar teachers say that the repentance of Rosh Hashanah should begin in Ne'ilah. Now, that means at the end of Yom Kippur, which is just coming, that's when you begin the cycle for the next year, right away. And so the idea is that this work, this process of taking account for ourselves and saying, I can do better, let me identify the ways I can do better, and let me put myself to work to become better, is a year-long process. And it's, in fact, a lifelong process. That's the Musar perspective, that you are your own project. And if you embrace that, then you got work to do. If you don't embrace it, you just stay rooted and rutted in the same condition, but that's not what the Jewish tradition calls on us to do. That's why Selichot, that's why Rosh Hashanah, we're called to make something more of ourselves. And the Musar tradition has come for that purpose. The word Musar shows up in the book of Proverbs in the second verse. So Proverbs is, a central book of the Torah, and the word Musar shows up there, and it shows up because it says, I am Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, and I have come to teach you Torah and wisdom and Musar. Chochmah u'Musar. So Solomon is known as the wisest of all people. He was King Solomon, the wisest person. And he's come to teach us wisdom, chochmah, but not just wisdom. Because wisdom on its own, intelligence on its own, ideas on their own are not enough. You have to activate the idea. You have to put it into practice. If you don't have the right idea, you're finished. You have to have the right idea, but then it has to be put into practice. It's not enough to know a very good definition of humility. My wife gets a daily, it's called Daily Good or something. It's some email that she receives, and one of them was recently on humility, and she sent it to me. And the guy in it defined humility, which I did in one of my books too. And I wrote back to her that I thought my definition of humility was better than his. Which actually does prove my point, which is not enough to have a definition of humility. You actually have to be humble. And so it is. And so that's why Solomon came to teach us Chochmah u'Musar. The Musar tradition began 1,100 years ago as a formal tradition or formal practice within the Jewish world. That was in the 10th century. We're talking about the 900s. And it developed century after century after century, book after book after book, teacher after teacher after teacher, until the 19th century. In the 19th century, it kind of exploded in Eastern Europe into what became known as the Musar movement. And if you look in the library or on the internet, you'll find there are a dozen at least, maybe more, books on the history and the teachings of the Musar movement. It's not accidental that most of us in this room grew up knowing nothing about Musar or the Musar movement. How many people here, I'll just do a quick survey. How many people here grew up knowing something about Musar or the Musar movement, growing up? Don't be shy. Nobody. That's unusual. There's usually somebody from, oh, okay, we got one. Okay, that's better. What? And you're a rabbi. That's no excuse. Because when I began teaching, and I would go around, I mentioned last night that after I had studied with my teacher, Rabbi Pear, for quite a while, I said to him, I'm thinking of writing a book. And I felt like I should write a book because I had learned so much that was valuable in my own personal life. And I would talk to other people, no one knew anything about it. And so I began to think, I should share this. It's like, and he said to me, and I quoted him last night, he said, you're obligated to write a book. And so I did. I wrote a book, and then I was very surprised that other people were actually reading it. And so I eventually got to travel around, and I ran into many rabbis who had never heard the word Musar, and certainly had never been exposed to it in rabbinical school. And there are reasons for that, and I'm not going to go into that, because we are the living proof of it, that there were reasons that this 1,100-year-old tradition, there's something happened, and as I said, there are factors. I'll leave some time at the end for questions, so if you want more on that, I can share that later. But the fact is, we grew up without it. We grew up, if we had exposure to the Jewish world, it was the chokhmah, it was the wisdom, it was the teaching of the Jewish world, but the spiritual practice, the idea, how do you change yourself? How do you do it? What should you be looking at? What should you be working on? How should you work on it? That's the essence of the Musar tradition. And none of that was made available to our generation. And as a result, I have come to realize that we are a generation of spiritual orphans, because it's not like we didn't have ancestors in the spiritual world of Judaism. We do. Many teachers in those 1,100 years left us tremendously wonderful books, and many of them are translated into English by now. Some of them are in multiple translations into English. But we grew up without exposure to that. And it's really unfortunate because at the same moment that the Jewish world was not providing guidance for you as an individual soul on this mysterious journey of life so you could learn more about your inner life and how to work with it, the wider culture was waking up to spirituality and psychology. And so the Jewish world and what it was providing, I'm talking about 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. What the Jewish world was providing was out of step with what people were coming to realize they needed. And therefore, what happened is people went elsewhere. Because if your soul is not being fed, and I'm not talking just about fed in the way of ruach. It's not all lie. It's how do you overcome the challenges that here at this season we are told you should be looking at, and they're your own unique individual challenges. Everybody has their own set of traits. Everybody has their own set of virtues and their excellence, and everybody has areas where they could grow a bit, unrealized potential. And as a result, if you do a Buddhist meditation retreat now in North America, there is an excellent chance it will be led by someone named Goldstein, Kornfeld, Salzman, Burstein, Schwartz. I didn't make up any of those names. Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfeld, Sharon Salzman, Sylvia Burstein. Because the Jewish world was not satisfying the needs, the spiritual needs of the people who were born into it or chose to become part of it. The gifts of Musar have become better known in the last 15 years, thank God, and Jews who are searching for inner meaning and inner guidance now have access to practices that they can call on that are authentically Jewish. I recently had an experience, I'm talking about in the last month, that showed me just how far the Musar teachings have spread. And through it, I got to see the Jewish world and Musar in a different perspective. And how important it is that we reorganize the Jewish world to deal with the passage of the unique individual soul through life. Because our Jewish world is organized for the collective. It's organized for the group. No one picks when they do Selichot. No one says, I'm going to do Rosh Hashanah in May. The Jewish world, because you laugh because it's not the way we can't possibly consider like that, and nor should we. That's the religious side and it's organized, but the whole thing is organized in that collective form. And I want to give you this story of what happened to make the point of how significant it is, and you'll see it coming back through the story, to provide guidance for soul living in the Jewish world. I received an email from somebody named Izzy Avraham, and he wanted to connect with me on one of the social networking sites. He wanted to link up. It was actually LinkedIn. And I'd never heard of Izzy Avraham, and so I clicked to find out more, and his profile indicated that he and I seemed to have a lot in common. He announced himself as the founder of the Musar Center in Jerusalem. So, okay, I'm interested. I'm the founder of the Musar Institute in North America and elsewhere, but he founded the Musar Center in Jerusalem. And on LinkedIn, here's what he wrote. I desire to live a life of faith, hope, love, joy, peace, light, and life. I help others live that life too by teaching Musar at musar.center. Visit us for lists of 100 Musar books and 48 midot, which are character traits, and see why literally thousands of people from every walk of life enjoy getting our free weekly lessons by text or email. Our program is perfect for use in congregational settings and bar bat mitzvah preparation, in addition to individual, chavrusa, and vad contexts. Check out www.musar.center for more info and message me if you have any further questions. Okay. Sounds good. Nothing of concern here, is there? And then I dug a little deeper. On another LinkedIn page, he describes himself like this. I help people get closer to Yeshua of Nazareth through Hebrew. And here he lists a number of websites. And if you don't recognize the name Yeshua, it's the Hebrew for Jesus. In his initial approach to me, there was no hint of that, but he was not really hiding it very well, or even intending to, because this is what it says on his Facebook page. I had studied through the entire Hebrew Bible a couple of times and had also read through 3 different Hebrew translations of the New Testament when I sensed it was time to tackle the Mishnah. To make a long story short, thank God he did, or this would be a very long quote. To make a long story short, I didn't even make it through the first page before I was lit up. I felt like I had stumbled into the world of Yeshua and his disciples. These writings came from the same Jewish world that produced the New Testament, and it goes on, and you get the point. He had an agenda that was not made clear to me on the first time around. There was no hint of Jesus on the initial LinkedIn page. And so I felt that I was being hoodwinked. This was a deliberate misrepresentation. And so I emailed him, or I messaged him through the site, and I challenged him. And I said, how do you explain the what's here? Because you founded the Musar Center, but it seems to me it's all about being a Christian missionary to the Jews. And he got back to me, and he didn't deny his interest in Jesus, but he denied being a missionary. He said, I'm not trying to draw Jews into Christianity. So I said, that doesn't seem to be consistent with what I'm reading on your pages. And so his answer was, he said, I'm non-binary. And in his case, he meant he wasn't either Jewish or Christian. which is actually completely impossible and inconsistent, because either the Messiah has come or the Messiah has not come. There's no middle ground. Either the Messiah has come or not come. You can't be non-binary about that. I was very aware of Christian missionaries. I think we all are. It's been a long-standing phenomenon, Jews for Jesus and so on. But I'd never heard anybody going so far in using Musar as the bait for attracting people to Christianity. And I was annoyed, and that was my initial response, and I sat with that for a while. And then I got over being annoyed. I said, what's he doing? Like, why Musar? If you go into the Orthodox world and you tell people you're interested in Musar, I remember once, it may have been in somewhere around the Midwest, so I said to someone that I was a teacher of Musar, and he said, I'm interested in Musar, he said, for other people. And it doesn't have a very good reputation, because in the past, Musar was quite harsh. It was quite ferocious. It was quite confrontative. And it changed a lot in the post-war period. And my Musar teacher talks about cultivating growth. And I've picked up that language, and that works for me, and it works for our generation. He said, my teacher said, Rabbi Perry said once, I believe that sometimes telling a person exactly what they're doing wrong and right to their face and forcefully, that can cut through everything that's going on for that person and propel them forward like nothing else. He said, I believe that. And I've been teaching for 35 years, and I haven't found quite the right circumstance in which to use that technique. So I got past it, and I said, what's he doing? Why is he using Musar? This is like using, a pickle for bait on your hook. It's like... And then I thought about it more, and I thought, he's onto something. He's onto something that we need to think about. It was another reflection back for me about he sees the spiritual hunger in the Jewish world. He sees that we, as a collective community, frankly, talk about cheshbon nefesh, taking responsibility. We haven't done a very good job of cultivating guidance systems for individuals on journeys. And so people are taking their questions and their needs elsewhere. And he was dipping his fishing rod into those waters. I know you have spiritual hunger, he's saying. I'm aware of the God-shaped hole at the center of your heart. And I know it's not being addressed in the synagogue. I know it's not being addressed in the Jewish community. Come, he says. Here's the satisfaction you're looking for that's not available to you. Come, you'll be satisfied and filled by discovering Rabbi Jesus. The need is real. That's what I got out of this. When I got over my annoyance, I saw, he's right. The need is real. His solution to the problem is not one I endorse, but it is a good reflection back. If you're losing people to other places, take a look at what they're offering and see, are you satisfying that need? And I would say that this is a place for improvement in the Jewish world. And so I want to make that point. And I want to draw that into two places. I could say a lot about it because it's really I think about it a lot because it's very important for Jewish continuity. It's very important for Jews to live lives as full and rich, infused with Jewish sources as possible, to be guided from within our own world. It's important that that be made available to people, so I think about it a lot. But I want to point out two ways in which I can show the kind of implication of having that guidance system available to you and me in this world. Most of us lack Jewish tools that would help us contend with the reality of our lives. That's why people go to other traditions. That's why people go to psychologists. That's why Jews read so many self-help books, and Jews since the time of Abraham, we have been trying to improve ourselves and we look for sources. But we have not received, because we're spiritual orphans, we lack the Jewish tools. People don't agree with much. They don't agree with much, that's true. They don't agree on much these days in these divisive times. And there's no doubt that our world is dealing with a tremendous number of problems. Every time I come together with a group, I hear something about something that was disrupted because of the pandemic, something that was lost because of the pandemic. It could be people that were lost because of the pandemic, or an education, or a job, or so much was lost. How about political polarization? I'm a Canadian, don't shoot. Oh, anti-Semitism on the rise, racism, gun violence, wealth inequality, the politicization of the judiciary, the demise of civility, the collapse of trust in civic institutions. We could go on. This era is plagued. I'm not talking about the era, today, right now. Our world is filled with more problems than I think any of us could have seen coming. This wasn't what we thought the world would look like in 2022, but it does. Challenging times. And you know what? It's not the first time for the Jews. This is not the first challenging era we've had to live through when the society around us, or including us, went through turmoil. I made a short list. The destruction of the 2 temples in Jerusalem and the exile of the Jews who were not massacred when that happened. The Crusades and their murderous march across Europe. The Spanish Inquisition, when Jews were tortured and executed. The Cossack pogroms. My father was born in Kishinev in Moldavia, which was the site of the first pogrom of the 20th century, which is why they left before the Holocaust. And then there's the Holocaust. We have a long history of contending with civic disruption on a huge scale, for which this is incomparably less in a lot of ways than any of those examples I gave. But because, and I'm not talking about the history, we know the history. It's the spiritual lessons, it's the guidance for inner living. How do you live through troubled times? Not our historians, not our recorders of the facts, but our rabbis and our teachers learned lessons from dealing with their own chaotic, challenging, divisive times that we have not accessed. We don't have access to it. We don't even know where the door to those teachings is. And as a result, we lack Jewish tools, which our ancestors won through hard experience. And therefore, we don't have those to bring to bear. And the second point is we need tools. We need to know how we deal with this situation. Is that even if we are developing or incorporating tools into our lives to deal with our situation, there's a very high probability they're not Jewish tools. Because we are using tools, we need tools. Even where Jewish spirituality shows up, like the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, the core practice of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality is mindfulness. And their primary teacher is Sylvia Boorstein, who is Jewish and a teacher of Buddhist meditation. Because mindfulness in its core is not a Jewish practice. There are many Jewish practices, but mindfulness happens not to be a significant one. The influences that came into play in the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and wherever mindfulness is being taught, is because people don't have access to Jewish tools, so they need tools. So they take what tools are available. And I'm not saying the tools are not good. I'm not at all evaluating the tools. I'm just saying they're not Jewish. And even if they get dressed up in talis and tefillin, they're still not Jewish. And that's the Judaizing of non-Jewish practices into the Jewish world. That's one example of non-Jewish practices coming into play. I want to give another one. And these are things where, if you see it in the light or through the perspective of the long history of Judaism, you'll see that the way it's happening in this generation is not on track 100%. So we have a long history. Like Musar itself is 1,100 years old. Chassidut, the newcomer on the block, is about 300 years old. And Kabbalah is much older than that, but even the fluorescence of the Kabbalistic tradition was from the 1600s, so that's 500 years old. We have a long history of spirituality, but we haven't done a good job of making it vital and real and accessible. And I want to bring another example. And this example is Tikkun Olam. Because, of course, Tikkun Olam has been part of the Jewish world. You know, the teaching of the Ari from 16th century Tzfat in Kabbalah talks a lot about Tikkun Olam. It's actually the center part of his view of what the work in the metaphysical work that needs to happen in the world is. Where the term Tikkun Olam shows up in the traditional literature is in the Aleinu prayer, which we do at the end of every service. And I was paying attention today. The part where it says Tikkun Olam is not included in the Reform abbreviation of Aleinu. But it says, the phrase is, Litaken Olam b'malchut Shaddai, to improve the world under the sovereignty of God. And when you look at what's happened with Tikkun Olam, it's become social action. And not much incorporation into Tikkun Olam of Malchut Shaddai, of the sovereignty of God. It's become humanized exclusively. So what are we doing? We're addressing other people's needs, full stop. We're dealing with social problems, full stop. And in the way Tikkun Olam has come to be practiced in our modern Jewish world, and again, just as I'm saying, I'm not evaluating mindfulness, I'm also not evaluating, especially not in a negative way, dealing with other people's physical needs, as you'll hear. But if it were to happen properly in a Jewish world, it would include spirituality and it would include religion. It would include God's presence in the world. And my view is that Tikkun Olam has been secularized, that we've taken secular social action into the Jewish world, much as we've taken mindfulness into the Jewish world, and kind of Judaized it to a certain extent. But basically what's happening in the Jewish world is we're filling the void because the Jewish world is not providing the full guidance for what we need. And then we end up with something which is not fully Jewish in that whole. That's my thesis, and I brought two examples to just illustrate the point. I could bring many more, but I think two of very different kinds, mindfulness meditation and Tikkun Olam, that makes the point that I'm trying to make. And if I feel brave enough, I will leave time at the end for questions. But I feel that as Jews, we should at least have access to the wisdom acquired by previous generations and see if that's going to work for us. And in my studies of Musar, I've been very influenced and hold in high regard Rabbi Yisroel Salanter, Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv, Rabbi Yosef Yotzel Horowitz, Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, and others. And I expect that those names, for the most part, will be completely unknown to you, as they were to me. I didn't begin my Jewish journey till I was 47 years old, which meant, in the first instance, learning Hebrew as an adult. And I got exposed to these people and came to revere their teachings because they were very practical and applicable in my life. And hence I went on to write books and do what I did because it worked in my life. I want to give two examples now of what happens when you bring the teachings of the previous generations into the issues of our time. Again, I could bring many illustrations, but I want to give two. I want to deal in the first instance with one of the major problems we have, which we face, and we face it at every level of society and community and family, which is tolerance. There's not a lot of tolerance in our world. And if you look at the way people speak to each other in political discourse, and not even speak to each other, behave toward each other, and in the community level, I think it's, as I said, we don't agree on much, but I think we could agree on that there's a lot of intolerance of other people. And I'm not going to address the higher level. I want to bring it down to a practical or more accessible level, which is the family. I hear a lot about families that can no longer gather together at the same dinner table because of political differences. And, the differences are that one side of the family thinks that Donald Trump is the Messiah, and the other side thinks he's the devil incarnate, and they can't get together at the same dinner table anymore for Rosh Hashanah or Pesach or Shabbat or anything. And I'm sure you could bring many examples of that in your experience because, as I said in my cover, I'm a Canadian. I still live in Canada. You're all welcome, by the way. We have a guest room. One at a time, you can come. Okay, so what can we learn from previous generations of tolerance? Because what I'm talking about is within a family. You should be sticking together. These are your brothers and your sisters and your cousins and your parents and maybe your own children. We want strong families. That's a Jewish tradition too. And we've got this issue of intolerable behavior. The question is, how do we deal with that? And I want to bring a teaching from the 16th century. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero was a great rabbi of the Tzfat Kabbalistic fluorescence of the 16th century. He wrote a book called Tomer Dvorah, Palm Tree of Deborah. In it, he had an amazing idea, which I think is so brilliant, and why the book is so popular, and you can find it in a number of English translations. You can find it translated into English on the internet. Forget the Hebrew, it's like readily available. In the introduction, he brings a paradigm for us. He says, I'm going to look at the relationship between God and Israel, and then I'm going to find principles in there that you can apply in your own life. What's the relationship between God and Israel? It's loving. It's caring. It's committed. It's a very strong relationship. The Jews and God, strong relationship. And you know what? There are some problems in the relationship. And we have problems with God. God has problems with us. Read the Torah. Read the Torah. I will wipe these people off the face of the earth, God says, and I will bring up a new nation with you, Moses, as the leader. That's what's in the Torah. It's and Moses responds to that and says, you can't get rid of these people, and then God makes covenants with us. And Rabbi Cordovero in the 16th century said, you know what? It's just like human relations. We have, you're married to someone, or you're living with someone, or you got a family. You love them. You're committed to them. You want to be good to them. And you know what? They're a pain in the butt. And there are problems in the relationship. And that's the kind of relationship he's looking at. Because it's a good relationship. He's not talking about an abusive relationship or one you don't want to be in. It's one you're committed to. And there's love in that relationship. And there's problems. How do you deal with them? And he lists 13 steps. And the first one is tolerance. And the word for tolerance in Hebrew is the same word as patience, savlanut. And the first of the 13 steps is savlanut. You have to tolerate the other person. If you're going to be able to work through this difficult relationship, the first step is you have to work on yourself to be tolerant. The second step of the 13 is to be tolerant. Now, I don't think he was repeating himself. I think he was making a really strong point to us. If you want to heal that relationship, you're going to need a double dose of tolerance. It's not enough to tolerate. You're going to have to work even harder to double tolerate. He's only got 13 to work with, and the first 2 go to savlanut. Okay, so that's good. So we need to know we need to be tolerant or patient. This is a virtue a person should emulate, Ramak says. Even if one is insulted, one should not withdraw their benevolence from those upon whom one bestows it. So these are your family members. You give to them. You are kind to them. You are benevolent. You have benevolent wishes towards them. Just because they're acting in a way that you find offensive, and that's what he says, even if one is insulted, even if they've given you offense, don't withdraw your benevolence from them. And, okay, then we have to ask a question. Do we know what patience or tolerance is? Do we know? And that's where the teaching from Jewish sources becomes particularly effective. Because, as you may know, Hebrew words are put together out of root letters. And you can often make connections between different words by looking at they're built out of the same letters. The word shalom is made out of the same root letters as the word shalem. Shalem means whole. You learn something about peace by knowing that in Hebrew it has something to do with making things whole. The word savlanut, samech lamed vet, shares its root with a number of other words. It gives us an insight into what patience or tolerance is, because if I were to say to you, which is it? Is patience not getting upset, not getting annoyed, having equanimity, being calm in the face of insult? Or does it mean you actually want to kill that person and you don't? And I would say in general in our society, people are divided and don't really have clarity on that. But the word savlanut, which is patience or tolerance in Hebrew, shares a root. You'll hear it in the words sevel, which means suffer, sivlot, which means burdens, and then a really interesting one, sabal. Does anyone know what a sabal is? A porter. A porter. The person who carries your bags at the airport or the train station or the bus. A porter. Say, what's the connection between patience, suffering, burdens, and a porter? Except it makes perfect sense. Because what we're being told from within Hebrew is that it doesn't have anything to do with equanimity or being calm. If you have equanimity and you're calm and everything's cool, you don't need patience. When do you need it? When you're upset. I have an image of the old cartoons, so they had steam coming out of the ears. That's when you need patience. And what does it mean? It means you're a sabal. You're a porter for your own suffering. You have to be able to carry your suffering, not never have it, not put it aside. It's the recognition that what it means to be tolerant of another person is you have to do the work on yourself to be big enough and strong enough to know your feelings. You've got the feelings. You're not denying the feelings. You don't have to use them. They don't have to motivate you to lash out because you're bigger than them. And my Musar teacher talks about opening a space between the match and the fuse. That behavior, that's a match. And you have the choice about whether you bring forward your fuse or not. And that's something that be cultivated over time. And so I think that has real applicability in our era to learn that in order to create peace in the family, even over things like political divisiveness, the focus is not changing the other person's mind. The process starts with changing yourself to be a larger vessel, to be a better porter of your own suffering. and not say, my goal is to convince that person or overpower that person. My goal is to be able to hold my own emotion. And that's why Rabbi Cordovero puts it at the beginning of the process. Because if you can't hold your own emotion, nothing that comes later matters. You have to be able to stay present with the other person, and maybe you don't argue. Or maybe you do, or maybe you ask a clarifying question, or maybe you stay silent. There's no prescription there. You'll guide yourself if you are large enough not to be motivated by the anger, but there's a space between the match and the fuse, and that's where you can live from your place of greater wisdom. I just want to mention briefly the other example, and I want to go back to the issue of Tikkun Olam, because the Musar movement of the 19th century was led by Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. It was founded and led by one guy. He was born in 1810. He died in 1884. And in his life, we have many examples, many stories have come down to us of things he did that we would call social action. Of course, as I said, he was the founder of a Jewish spiritual movement, but in his view, there was no contradiction between being spiritual and undertaking social action. Once he was asked to certify the matzah at a new matzah bakery. So the bakery owner called him. You have to have a rabbi certify that the matzah is kosher. There are all kinds of rules for that. And, of course, the owner calls him to do that at a time when he thinks he's got everything lined up and it's all fine. He takes him to this spanking new facility, shows him the workers, shows him the processes, shows him the oven, shows him the final product. And he says to him, well, what does the rabbi think? And the rabbi says, I cannot certify your matzah as kosher. And the owner is shocked, and he says, why not? We didn't bake it for more than 18 minutes. And he said, I can't certify it because there's blood in the matzah. Now, that always was one of the blood libels in Europe, that Jews were stealing Christian children because you needed to have blood to put in the matzah. It was a cause of many, many Jewish deaths. So for him to invoke that was a very powerful image. He said, blood in the matzah? That's impossible. And Rabbi Salanter said, the blood in the matzah is the blood of your workers because I see the way you're exploiting them. And it's not real blood I'm talking about. It's the way you're treating your workers, and I won't certify your matzah bakery. 1848, an example of something that came very close to our own experience. There was a cholera epidemic in Vilna, and many people were sick and dying. In 1848, they didn't even know yet what caused cholera. That got figured out in 1850 in England, and they thought it was something floating around in the air. But Rabbi Salanter felt, so it was just before Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Salanter felt that fasting on Yom Kippur would weaken people and make them more susceptible to cholera. So he declared in the city of Vilna, which was the main religious center for all of Judaism in Eastern Europe, it was called the Yerushalayim of Europe. He declared that Yom Kippur would not be a fast this year. And to make sure that people got that message, he went up to the bima with a cup of wine on Yom Kippur evening, Kol Nidre evening, with a cup of wine and a piece of cake, and he made kiddush, and he made a bracha, and he ate, and he drank to tell people, you are forbidden to fast. And then just one third example, and I'll stop with that. He was walking through a town and he saw that the poorhouse had a leaking roof. They used to have houses where they would house the poor, and it was in terrible, dilapidated shape. So he confronted the elders of the town. He said, your poorhouse is in terrible condition. What are you going to do about it? And they said, well, we've been working towards raising some money. We're not quite there yet on the fundraising campaign. And we have these other priorities. And you can imagine the whole conversation. He said, well, you know what? If your poorhouse is good enough for poor people to sleep in, it's good enough for me to sleep in too. and he bedded down in this leaky, windy, cold poorhouse, and he stayed there until the elders of the town raised enough money to repair the roof of the poorhouse. You might think that he was being a social activist like you and me, or the contemporary version of people who do that kind of thing. But I want to give you two quotes from him. A good Jew is not someone who worries about someone else's soul and his own stomach. A good Jew is someone who worries about someone else's stomach and his own soul. B'malchut Shaddai, the idea that in taking care of other people, I'm doing my soul work. There's two things in focus here, not just the social action, but the impact on soul. And to see yourself as a soul in progress, as a project, means in working on the outer world, you're simultaneously working on the inner world. And he said that even more clearly in another quote. He said, spirituality is higher than materiality, but the material needs of another person are my spiritual need. I can't advance spiritually. I am committed to spirituality beyond the material world. Holiness matters more than poverty. But I can't proceed towards holiness unless I take responsibility for other people's poverty. That's the equation. And I hope you can hear how different it is from the idea of we're just feeding people. There's an entire dimension added that in our contemporary world is missing, that is part of the Aleinu prayer and is part of the Jewish concept. But in our era, we have not had the full breadth of teachings, as I said, from previous generations like this. And again, my exploration of tolerance and tikkun olam are just illustrations. I believe there's a lot of work to do in structuring our world to make these teachings available in the present era, and it will serve us well. From the dinner table to the bakery to the poorhouse and wherever else we might be involved. On Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to wrap up now, so there are a few minutes for questions. On Rosh Hashanah, the goal is, the key thing is to take responsibility for yourself. If you don't take responsibility for yourself, you can't expect other people to take responsibility for themselves. The remarkable thing is, and I've learned this through seeing many students go through Musar courses and Musar processes, the wondrous thing is that when you start to change yourself, other people change. If you just expect other people to change, nobody changes. Change yourself and change the world. Judaism has a long-term view. We invest in the long term. And it turns out that that long-term view is very useful in the short term. That long-term view is looking back as well as forward. That we don't just deal with the present moment. We understand where we came from. We treasure the lessons that the generations before us learned, and not only learned, but bothered to pass on to us, and they did it out of compassion. And then we look at the long term. The inner traits of the individual, your patience, your kindness, your generosity, your truthfulness, your enthusiasm, your trust, all the qualities that the Musar teachers have focused on for 1,100 years, I call that the Jewish mutual fund. It's our mutual fund. We've been investing in it for centuries, and we've learned that in the long run, that's what works out. In the Torah, it tells us who was the most humble person on the face of the earth. We live in an arrogant era, and young people can be convinced that unless they were arrogant and self-assertive and proving themselves better than everyone else, that's not the Jewish view. Moses was the most humble person on the face of the earth. Leadership as humility, all part of the Jewish mutual fund of inner traits. Our ancestors invested in it, paid off for them. I hope our generation can wake up and use Rosh Hashanah as a time to see how important it is that we also reinvest in kindness, in humility, in patience, in compassion, just like our ancestors did. Because those are the traits that we need, and the Jewish world needs, and the world at large needs into the future as well. I'm done. Do I take questions or should we move on? Okay, we have time for just a couple questions. Yeah, I will. Any questions? Or did I bludgeon you with my eye? No? I'm quite happy to move on if you don't have questions or comments. But I prefer questions. Yes? Okay, the question is, what at age 47 made me decide to turn in this direction? Because at that point in my life, I was actually a film producer, and I'd been running a film production company, and that company collapsed. And the reason the company collapsed, as I did that self-assessment and looked at what had happened, I said was because of me. Because I didn't have an ethical or a strong enough guidance system for how to be a person in the world. I had an extremely successful life till I was 47. I mentioned in the introduction, I was a Rhodes Scholar, I have a PhD from Oxford. I had published books in anthropology. I had a tenured position. It was like, it all gone really well. And then at a certain point, I got whacked by life. And when life whacked me, I had to look and say, what's my role in that? And I realized everything I was saying tonight is true for me. I'm part of this generation. I didn't have that guidance system either. And I learned by going back and doing the hard work. And some of it I've written about, but it's, as I said, I learned Hebrew when I was 47. It was time to really dig in to say, the Jews of the past knew a lot about how to live. I need that. I need that teaching. I need that information. And it's worked out for me, and I'm still here and still doing it. One more question, and then we're going to close if there is time. One more. Okay. So the question was, I spent a lot of time saying we don't have the perspective on Jewish spirituality and not much time telling you how to get it. I'm going to use an analogy. It's just an analogy. When you've got an illness, you have to spend a lot of time on the diagnosis. And to me, I think that it takes a long time. It took me a long time to come to realize what it means to be a spiritual orphan. And I think that most of us, it took me years to realize I was an orphan. I have parents. I mean, they've passed away now. I have grandparents. All my children's great-grandparents are buried in Toronto, all 8 of them. But spiritually, it took me a long time to realize what it meant not to have that direct connection to the previous generations and their teachings coming down clearly. So I think it's, for me, I don't have enough time to say where to go next. It wouldn't be a bad idea to check out the website of the Musser Institute. and go, you can do what I did too. Go get books. Get books. Get books by all the Musser teachers. They're not hard to find. It's not a hidden tradition. And so those are 2 suggestions I would make. And with that, I wish you a Shana Tova Umituka, a good and sweet year ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moranes. Thank you, and our service will begin in about 10 minutes. You can get the Sidur Mishkan Halev, that it's in the carts at the entrance of the sanctuary. Again, 10 minutes for a break. Don't go too far away, please. So glad you're joining us this evening. I'm Rabbi Javier Carapan, and on behalf of our congregation and of the Rabbinical Association of Greater Kansas City, I would like to welcome all of you to our Selichot service. I was looking at the calendar. This happens to be my 7th consecutive Selichot service, so I love number 7, so something good for me. 7, yes. Special thank you to the Jewish Federation for the continued and generous financial support of our Selichot service. Special thanks also to our staff here at Congregation Beth Torah for their assistance in helping set up this evening's program and service. We would like to acknowledge everyone who is participating in the service this evening by inviting you to do something very unusual, which is you may take out your phone now for a last time, and before the beginning of the service, that if you scan, where is it? Go back one or forward. Previous slide, please. There you go. That's our digital program. And go ahead. You can do it while I talk. Special thank you to Toda Rabba to our clergy and our musical leadership team of musicians and soloists from the congregations across our community. Everybody is listed and acknowledged in our program. And you can keep it without destroying any trees. Now, once you've done it, now you need to turn off your phones, put them away, turn them off, put it in whatever thing they do that they don't make any noise. A big thank you to our BOW committee for bringing us beyond our walls, especially for helping us being online on our many virtual platforms. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you will see information and links in the comments. And in our virtual sanctuary, you can find the links right above the player. If you have any technological difficulties during the streaming, you can call TAL, our technical assistance line, at 913-303-1134. You may want to write it down before it's too late. And please text that number, and a dozen will call you as soon as they can. We appreciate the feedback about our Selichot program and our service. It helps us plan for next year. If you register to attend the service, you will receive a link to an online evaluation, and we would appreciate if you would please take a few minutes to complete and submit this form. Thank you very much again for joining us on this very special evening.
Yameinu The psalmist sang, "At midnight I rise to give thanks and praise." And so we come to this hour of Selichot under the canopy of night, to celebrate goodness, to proclaim what is right and true, to praise, to thank, to bless the great giver who gives and renews our lives. We turn to loved ones, to friends, and to our people everywhere, the whole house of Israel. And our hearts turn toward the human family. We pray for its healing. Yet hardest of all is the inward gaze, the return to ourself, the honest reckoning of the soul, cheshbon hanefesh. We ask how to account for selfish acts, lies, and senseless anger, how to account for the shadows, the storms, the bitterness in our lives, the damage and distress we cause, how to own up to it all and find our way back with integrity and in peace. We ask, have we the will to change? And if not now, when?
Good evening. I'm Rabbi Caitlin Brasner from B'nai Yehuda, and I share with you these words from Marge Percy. White butterflies with single black finger paint eyes on their wings dart and settle, eddy and mate over the green tangle of vines in Labor Day morning steam. The year grinds into ripeness and rot, grapes darkening, pears yellowing, the first Virginia creeper twining crimson, the grasses dry straw to burn. The new year rises, beckoning across the umbrellas on the sand. I begin to reconsider my life. What is the yield of my impatience? What is the fruit of my resolve? I turn from my frantic white dance over the jungle of productivity and slowly a nigun slides, cold water down my throat. I rest on a leaf spotted red. Now is the time to let the mind search backwards like the raven loosed to see what can feed us. Now the time to cast the mind forward to chart an aerial map of the months. The new year is a great door that stands across the evening, and Yom Kippur is the second door. Between them are song and silence, stone and clay pot to be filled from within myself. I will find there both ripeness and rot, what I have done and undone, what I must let go with the waning days, and what I must take in. With the last tomatoes, we harvest the fruit of our lives.
Shana Tova, Shavua Tov. I'm Rabbi Doug Albert of Congregation Kol Ami. Continue on the top of page 113. We are taught. Days are scrolls, write on them only what you want remembered, but we remember our weakness, and our days bear the mark of all that went wrong. On this night, we have hope in the one who sustains us. We continue responsively. Though we stumble and falter, if we stray from the truth, if we sink into the depths, if our urges betray us, if we distance ourselves, if we abandon your teachings, if we seek you sincerely, if we pray from the heart, though we stumble and falter,
I'm Rabbi Rachel Rothstein from B'nai Yehuda. Together on 114, Master of wonders, Mother of souls, forgive the darkness in our hearts, our loss of hope. Pardon our distraction, our ears closed to the pleas of the poor, and lead us to atonement. Master of wonders, Mother of souls, forgive us our circles of secrecy, knots of guilt, shame, and anger, webs of betrayal and greed. Pardon the pursuit of happiness that ends in worship of self, and lead us to atonement. Master of wonders, Mother of souls, refuse to forgive our refusal to forgive. Release our grudges, hatreds, and feuds. Puncture our stubborn self-righteousness and lead us to atonement. Master of wonders, Mother of souls, forgive our vanity in a universe of awe, our complacency in a universe of need. Pardon our failure to thank, praise, and salute every soul and every star, and lead us to atonement. Master of wonders, Mother of souls, forgive us our disregard and insolence, our distance from loved ones and friends. Pardon our daily inattentiveness, our failure to notice that we failed to notice, and lead us to atonement.
Give me I'm Rabbi Alan Londy of the New Reformed Temple. We continue in the middle of page 117. Our God and God of our ancestors, we are your people and you are our God. We are your children and you are our father, our mother. We are the people who serve you and you call us to serve. We are your community and you are our portion. We are your legacy and you are our purpose. We are your flock and you are our shepherd. We are your vineyard and you watch over us. We are your work and you are our maker. We are your beloved and you are our lover. We are your treasure and you are the one we treasure. We are your people and you reign over us. We offer you our words and you offer us yours. So forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement.
Please rise if you're able.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'chanun, El Rachum v'chanun, Erech Apayim, V'rav Chesed ve'emet, Notzer Chesed l'alafim, Notzer Chesed l'alafim, Nose avon v'afesha v'chata v'nakeh.
We would like to invite those who were assigned the changers of the Torah covers to join us with your rabbi and your congregation right here on our table.
השלושה דברים העולם קיים, השלושה דברים העולם קיים, השלושה דברים העולם קיים, השלושה דברים העולם קיים, על האמת ועל הדין ועל השלום.
It is our tradition to initiate new rabbis in town by offering them to share with us a message on Selichot. I did it 7 years ago. They haven't invited me back. And so it's a great pleasure to invite Rabbi Brasner, who is one of the rabbis at Congregation B'nai Yehuda. Rabbi, pleasure to have you. Welcome. And welcome to Kansas City. This is also a way to welcome you.
Well, I noticed something last week was I was walking my dog, Pig. And yes, the rabbi has a dog named Pig, but that is a story for another time. As Pig and I walked through my neighborhood, I realized that for the first time in a while, the sun wasn't blazing. It wasn't 98 degrees and humid. Instead, there was a cool breeze, and every so often, I heard the crunch of leaves under my feet. With each crackle and pop, I found myself grinning. Falling leaves, after all, mean autumn is on its way. Though I admit today's 90-degree temperatures might say otherwise. After our long, hot summer, I was grateful for last week's small peek into the season to come. Change was on the air, and I was, and still am, all too ready for it. This time of year, as we approach our High Holy Day season, it seems like the natural world begins to mimic the very changes we are undergoing as a Jewish community. Just as we are turning our attention to the twin sacred tasks of teshuvah, repentance, and slicha, forgiveness, just as we are trying to turn over new leaves of our own, the natural world around us undergoes its own transformation as well. This is the time for renewal, for casting off bad behaviors and letting go of old grudges, so that we might blossom and be refreshed in the year to come. And while the trees begin to drop their leaves unceremoniously, simply, or maybe miraculously, following the natural order of their ordained world, we Jews are a bit more formal in our endeavors. We mark this moment with the observance of Selichot. Throughout the Hebrew month of Elul, we are invited to begin our Cheshbon HaNefesh, the accounting of our souls that this season demands. We start to turn our thoughts inwards, reflecting on where we've erred in the last year and considering how we can do and be better in the year to come. We meditate on the theme of return, of returning to our truest selves and who we hope to be at our core. We are tasked with reaching out to those we've harmed, taking responsibility for our mistakes and asking for forgiveness. We are also challenged to offer forgiveness where and when able. This is a season for renewing and mending relationships, renewing and mending ourselves. And Selichot helps us to formally mark this moment, this season of change and return, with penitential prayers and rituals. Tonight, as we begin to hear the familiar melodies of the Chagim, as we pray for understanding and compassion, we help ourselves acknowledge that a new season has begun. Just now in our service, we changed over our Torah covers. In place of colorful textiles, we dressed our sacred scrolls in mantles of white, reflecting back to us our own hopes for purity like fresh white snow. After changing our covers, I think we might have missed this opportunity. We were supposed to hear Eitz Chaim, beautifully sung by our community choir. And in this prayer, we are reminded that Torah is a tree of life, that embracing its teachings, embracing our tradition, offers us pathways to understanding and peace. Like a tree deeply rooted, reaching up and out, Torah grounds us, ever green, ever present in our lives. And just as we hope to turn over new leaves in 5783, so too do our sacred scrolls dressed in white reflect that hope for change and renewal. In Midrash Shir Hashirim Rabbah, we read, "Open to me," the Holy One said to Israel, "my children, make for me an opening of teshuvah as small as the eye of a needle, and I will make the opening of forgiveness so wide that coaches and wagons could enter." As we enter into this High Holy Day season, as the leaves change and we gain the smallest glimpse of the fall, let us begin to create that small opening for teshuvah and slicha. Let the prayers of our heart and our hopes for forgiveness grow, and let us be open to all that this season may bring. Shana Tova.
I'm Rabbi Burl Pador, Congregation B'nai Beth Shalom. I'll figure it out. I've been with so many congregations in the last 10 years, but I'm now with Congregation Beth Shalom. And we continue on page 126. God of forgiveness, you examine the heart, reveal its depth, speak what is right. Majestic in wonders, ancient source of comfort, you recall our ancestors' covenant, seek out our innermost being. Soul of goodness, you bestow goodness and know all mysteries. Arrayed in righteousness, you overcome sin.
Please rise. Dibarnu dofi, Evinu, Vehirashanu, Sadanu, Hamasnu, Tafalnu Shaker. Maradanu, Niatsnu, Sararanu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararanu, Kishinu Oref, Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavanu, Tainu, Titanu.
Rabbi Stephanie Kramer from
Congregation B'nai Yehuda. We continue together on page 131. Al chet shachatanu lefanecha, we stray and we sin, when we fail to make peace the highest good, and when we are silent in the face of evil, when we forsake those who suffer far away, and when we shun the wronged and destitute among us, when we diminish God's image through violence or indifference, and when we fail to take care of those who depend on us, when we engage in slander or deceit, and when we distort the truth for personal gain, when we judge others harshly or unfairly, when we stoke the fires of communal strife, when we fail to embrace Torah, the tree of life, to walk its paths and make its own. We stray and we sin, when we offer no blessings, no words of thanks for the breath within us and for the wonder of being. Ve'al kulam Elohai Selichot, salach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, and lead us to atonement.
Please be seated. I am Rabbi Larry Carroll, retired rabbi in the community, member of my home congregation where I grew up, the Temple Congregation B'nai Yehuda. Page 133. What I'd like you to do is read the last line of each set of, each basic paragraph here, or each set of lines, along with me. Surely this mitzvah is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart. You shall not threaten the rights of the stranger or orphan. You shall not take a widow's garment in pawn. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Justice shall you pursue, that you may live to inherit the land that Adonai your God gives you. You must not remain indifferent. Keep and heed all that I instruct you. Thus it will go well with you and your children after you for all time. This mitzvah is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart. When you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf, it shall go to the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. Indifferent. Life and death I have set before you, blessing and curse. Choose life, so that you and your children may live. Blessed shall you be in your comings, and blessed shall you be in your goings. You must not remain indifferent.
Shema Koleinu Adonai Eloheinu Hus verachem aleinu vekabel berachamim uveratzon et tefillatenu. Hashiveinu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh yameinu kekedem.
Imagine how our lives might be if everyone had even a bit more of the wisdom that comes from seeing clearly. Suppose people everywhere simultaneously stopped what they were doing and paid attention for only so long as it took to recognize their shared humanity. Surely the heartbreak of the world's pain, visible to all, would convert everyone to kindness.
I'm Jonathan Rudnick. I have the privilege of serving as the Jewish Community Chaplain at Jewish Family Services. And we're on page 136 in the middle. Return now, Israel, to the one who forgives, for you have fallen because of your sin. Return as the shrill sound of the shofar that rises from the spiral of the ram's horn toward heaven. Take words with you and return to the eternal, and will be to Israel like dew, shall blossom like the lily. Return as the leaves in spring, renewed and beautiful. Stretch out your arms to God and return, like a child to her mother, to love and peace.
Would like to invite all the members of the Rabbinical Association to join me on the bima, as well as our shofar blower, and invite everybody who is able to please rise. We read together, "Hear, O Israel, hear now the heartbeat of Israel in the quiet space between a year that is ending and a year that begins. Hear the call of hope and joy, and hear the call of repentance and renewal. Hear the call to create and embrace. Hear the call to restore and to heal. Hear the call to atone and perfect, to search the soul and account for every deed. Hear the call to wrestle with sins and flaws, to fight injustice and serve the suffering. Hear the call to gather in the scattered sparks of divinity, and hear the call to seek the core of our humanity. Hear the call of compassion and forgiveness. Hear the call to return to Torah, to our people, to the one who teaches love and patience, mercy and truth. Hear the commanding sound of Teshuvah. Hear the urgent call of Tikkun.
Shema Kolenu, Avinu Malkinu, Chatanu Lefanecha, Avinu Malkinu, Chamor Aleinu, Ve'al Aleinu, V'tapeinu.
Shana Tova, Happy New Year.